I'm so excited for this conversation. To start, can you break down what high functioning depression is?
Absolutely. So I'm a psychiatrist and a therapist. And in my lab, when studying depression, we have to use something called the Bible of Psychiatry, which is the DSM-5. And when I do an evaluation for depression, I have to go through these lists of symptoms, such as poor sleep, low mood, something called anhedonia, which is a lack of joy, a lack of interest, a lack of pleasure, so feeling meh or bleh. All of these symptoms of depression, but at the very end of the list, if you're not low functioning, in fact, if you cope by being busy, what I call pathologically productive, your doctor is going to be like, well, come back when you break down. And I just thought that was such a broken model, right? We have so much preventative care. It's the equivalent of, let's say, you had symptoms of cancer and your doctor says, come back when it's stage 4. You'd be like, I'm getting another doctor, right? With menopause health, the same thing. We prevent the osteoporosis, we prevent the dementia with hormones. But in mental health, like we are in the dark ages. We are waiting for you to break down before we intervene. So I wanted there to be something for people like us, those of us who show up for our families, who are the rocks, who are the entrepreneurs, who are the thought leaders. There's got to be a way for us to feel supported. The healers are unhealed. So I did this research, the first ever study in the world on high functioning depression. It's peer reviewed and it was published in February of this year. And thank you. I'll take that applause. Because I wanted you to feel validated by the research. It's great to have ideas, but without that research, you're not validated. And so I did this work out of a labor of love and also because I'm high functioning AF. So I found that I needed support. And when I learned about the risk factors of high functioning depression, such as trauma, right? Trauma is something many of us try to outrun. We don't deal with our pain. We don't process our pain. We push it down. But when we don't feel our feels, that makes it very difficult to feel joy. So we end up with anhedonia. We end up feeling meh or bleh, right? And I want you to look at your hand. Everyone has a hand here, at least one, I hope. Most of us have 5 fingers. And I want you to look at your hand and I want you to tell yourself that joy is within your DNA. You were built with the DNA for joy. But many of us, we just forgot how to reclaim that joy. So I developed a system called the 5 V's so that you can tap into one of these 5 V's every day to reclaim your joy because it is your birthright as a human being to experience joy.
I love that. So what are these subtle signs of high functioning depression? How can you self-diagnose?
It's interesting because with my patients, I'll say to them, are you a human being or a human doing? And I see a lot of nods in here, right? Many of us try to feel loved and get a sense of self-worth from what we do, right? We're so enmeshed in our roles that we forgot who we are. But you were someone before you became a mother. You were someone before you became a partner to, your husband or wife or significant other. You were someone before you became an entrepreneur or, whatever career roles that you hold, student. But we get lost. We just get so busy focusing on what we can do, how we can prove our self-worth. And I think many people aren't aware that trauma leads you to feel low self-worth, shame, and blame. So you tend to take on these roles and busy yourself so that you feel like, okay, hey, look, I'm lovable. Look at what I can do. But you were someone before that. When I treat children, adolescents, and adults and elders in my lab, and then I look at the children in the waiting area because I have snacks. I'm one of the therapists that feeds you. And when they eat their snacks, they're like, mm. And then I look at the elders and they're like, mm. But the adolescents and the adults, they're always like, they're not even savoring it. So there are all of these points of joy in a day that we just leave on the table. And so I wanted people to understand that there is a real difference between this idea of happy versus the experience of daily joy. And I think many people don't know that.
So you talked a little bit about trauma. Where else can this constant drive to be pathologically productive, busy come from in people?
A lot of times it's based on your role in whatever industry. Look at medicine. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of my peers in medicine don't even want to acknowledge high functioning depression, right? Because it would mean having to look in the mirror and recognize it in themselves. But doctors don't want to do that. They don't want to admit that they're struggling. And I used to be an anesthesiologist. And let me tell you, doctors and healthcare providers, they face a lot of trauma. I remember my first month on internal medicine, I was doing CPR on a patient that ultimately did not make it. And I just remember feeling so like overwhelmed by this loss. And then literally after the patient was removed from the bed, they said, okay, who's taking the next shift, right? That's medicine, And if you show any pain and remorse, people shame you. They'll be like, this is part of the job. Get back into the trenches. So I think there's this absence of acknowledgement of the traumas on the daily job for many of us. If you are an educator, some of us work in situations where it's rowdy in the classroom and people are like, well, that's just part of the job. But these are all overwhelming things. If you're a business owner and you've been through bankruptcy, you may not make the criteria for trauma according to the DSM, the Bible of Psychiatry, but that is highly traumatizing because you have lost your livelihood. And so you may be threatened with the fact that you can't provide for your family. So these are all little t traumas that we don't acknowledge. And the way that we cope is by busying ourselves and being pathologically productive.
So we're in Miami. Perfect place to have this part of the conversation. You talk about the difference between things that are priceless and things with a price tag. Can you unpack that idea and how it plays out and impacts happiness?
Well, so this 5V method is one that I developed because I've traveled to over 30 countries studying mental health and healthcare. And something that is common across multiple cultures are certain numbers. So the number 5 is one of those things that you'll see just about everywhere. The number 7, 7 days in a week. The number 3. So we'll start with the first V, which is validation. So I'll ask you to trust me and just briefly close your eyes. And I want you to just, don't say it out loud, but just tell yourself one thing. So think about a time in your life when something unpleasant happened to you. You never really told anyone, or you only told a few people, and just say to yourself in your mind, don't say it verbally, this happened to me and it wasn't my fault, and I am worthy of love and happiness and joy. And now open your eyes. Thank you for trusting me. You can open your eyes now. And then the second V is venting. So venting is when you express how you feel. This is not the same as trauma dumping, right? Because many of us trauma dump. We don't really ask for emotional consent. But venting is naming the emotion. And in my lab, I'll do this demonstration where I hold a full balloon underwater. And if you don't let some of this air out, it just pops up. So when we don't let some of our expressions out, it'll pop up with our partners, it'll pop up with our kids, pop up at work in ways that then we feel guilty about because we had this big outburst. And then again, it continues that cycle of shame. So I will ask you to verbally vent on a count of 3, if you feel comfortable, one emotion that you felt today. It could be positive or negative. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. But the interesting thing is that you don't have to vent verbally. I treat a lot of neurodivergent clients, so some of them are comfortable praying, some of them are comfortable crying, writing. You can express emotions in ways that feel authentic to you. And the third V is values. These are things that are priceless, not with the price tag. So things like our faith, our family, and I'm going to do an exercise at the end of this, so pay attention. It's a scientific experiment on your values, but many times we chase the superficial and we forget the things that really anchor us. And then we wonder why we're not feeling joyful. It's because we took for granted the things that really ground us and anchor us. The fourth is vitals. I'm not going to go through that because we have all these experts who talk about the mind-body connection. But one of the things I do in my lab for vitals is breath work. But another thing I do, because I treat children, is laughing work. So how many of you all saw Wicked in here? Okay, good. So I want, on a count of 3, to give me your loudest witch cackle. 1, 2, 3. It's silly, right? But this science shows us that when we laugh, first our blood pressure goes up, but then it goes down. So it's a natural stress reliever. So you can do breath work, you can cry, but you can also laugh. And in some studies, when we laugh, it actually can change our mood. I got offered this study a couple of years ago in my lab where we were going to change the way people perceive themselves in the mirror to give themselves more of like the positive feedback from others based on laughter. And then the fifth is vision. How do you plan joy in the future so you don't get stuck in the past? And planning joy is important because on Fifth Avenue, where I practice, I'll ask the executives that I work with to open their calendars, and they have so many things planned for their careers, for their causes, for their kids, but they don't plan joy. But if we don't plan our joy, it's not going to happen. We're going to get too busy. So we have to be intentional about planning our joy and celebrating our wins. And a win doesn't have to be big. Like if I get my kid to school on time, which is really hard because our school is very strict, I will sit in my living room and I'll have a sip of coffee quietly to myself. And that's me celebrating my win. So it doesn't have to be grand. But what I'll ask for you to do when you leave here today is to thank yourself for being here, because you didn't have to be here. You could have spent your weekend doing something else on the beach, right? But you came here because you were curious about the science of your happiness and you wanted to invest in yourself because you are worthy. So when you leave here, thank yourself and share that joy by posting about it, and tell people about what you learned. Because I truly believe that joy has the capacity to heal communities. We've all seen what happens when leaders in communities are not joyful. Everyone under them is suffering. But when leaders are joyful, it spreads and it creates positive change. So share that change and that joy with others.
Oh, that's a good note to end on, but you wanted to do something, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I have this experiment that I've been doing on the road because I feel like science is something that gets lost. If you don't learn it in school, if you're not constantly learning it, then you kind of forget about it. And the symbolism is so important. So I'm from Trinidad originally, and I've traveled to all these countries learning about different rituals. And I'm going to just ask, if there anyone here who has a background in the UK? Thank you. Anyone from there? UK, right there. What about India? Okay. And then South America? Right. Africa? Uh-oh. Any other parts of Europe in here? Any other Asian countries like China, Russia, Australia? Wow. This is a pretty a diverse crowd. That's great. Okay. So in each of your cultures, you have certain rituals. And the idea of ritual is important because the symbolism allows us to feel more at ease. Human beings need structure, we need routine, and rituals help us with that. So many of you from different countries probably have little symbols in your home. So when I've traveled to India, I've seen shrines. In parts of Asia, jade. In certain other countries, masks and candles and so forth. So my ritual that I keep in my office are stones, and you can do this at home as well, but you can pick your own rituals. And this one says community. And so I like to pour into my community because that makes me feel good. It's like altruistic. So I'm gonna put it in there. Family. Family is something I feel really strongly about, so that's one of the things that are priceless. Faith. My dad's a pastor, so if you can't tell from the way that I deliver messages. And knowledge. I used to really love learning before I became a medical student, when I was just learning to survive, right? But recently I've started to read for fun again, and it's combated my own personal anhedonia. And so I like to use this symbolism because when we get distracted by the things like the accolades, like what other people think and all the superficial things, we start to lose sight of the things that anchor us and give us purpose and meaning in life. And then we feel lost. And so with my clients, I have them keep these stones in their purse or in their briefcases or at their desk. And when they're feeling lost and feeling a lack of joy, just anchor yourself in the things that give you meaning and purpose. Practice one of the 5 E's every day or every other day. And then you'll see that you start to have a clearer vision as to what's really important. And it's easy to do it, right? I don't ask you to do all 5 E's at once. Do 1 or 2. It's all about getting points of joy. So if you don't get a point today, there's a chance for a point tomorrow. because the goal is to increase your individual points of joy, not to become this idea of happy. Because the science shows us that I'll be happy when I get this partner, I'll be happy when I get this career, etc., we're still not happy. But shift your mindset and try to get your points of joy daily. And that is way more attainable and more hopeful.
Thank you so much. Joy is the perfect note to close on.
Thank you.